Welcome back. So tonight we have a live guest in studio, the President's spokesperson and minister in charge of government communications is joining us in studio to talk about 35 days of His Excellency John Mahama's presidency. Before we talk to him, here is a preview of a short documentary that the presidency put together highlighting some of the work done by the president in his first 30 days of office.
We will hold a national economic dialogue to draw up a 4-year fiscal consolidation plan. We would rationalize taxes, abolishing, among others, the obnoxious e-levy.
I have the singular honor as the returning officer of the 2024 presidential election to declare His Excellency John Dramani Mahama as the winner of the 2024 presidential election and the president-elect of the Republic of Ghana.
My brothers and sisters, it is with tremendous humility that I accept this clear mandate that you, the good people of Ghana, have given me to lead this great nation as your next president.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
His 120-day social contract encompasses 26 key initiatives. These include economic reforms, governance standards, prudent expenditure, justice and compensation, policy reviews including education, and the fight against corruption.
As for recovering any loot, it must be on top of the agenda of any government because corruption bites so hard. This work that I do, the fact that people amass so much wealth and deprive others, that is why we get the kinds of vulnerabilities we see. The link is so direct that if you don't deal with looted items, corruption, you are going nowhere. So we agree with Oral. The Attorney General's Department has specific instruction. I expect the Attorney General to make sure Oral keeps within its legal mandate. Okay, I disagree with people who say it's not constitutional. I disagree. I think that even here, people can come here and report that crimes have happened to them in their homes. Then we take it up and then we let it go to the police. So I don't see why a committee cannot do that kind of thing. We won't do what the police does, but we receive the information. Okay, so the most important thing is that Oral does not overstep its bounds. That will open it up to challenges. And the way the Ghanaian courts can be very active when it comes to these things because they will apply the law. Okay, so just don't overstep your bounds. Do what is necessary, give it to the institutions and let them work. And I believe that with somebody like Dominic Ayene, who many of us know, we expect him to do a good job.
President Mahama admits there is no breathing space. A day after his inauguration, he held a crucial meeting with the African Development Bank.
Significant players in the global economy, key development partners. As we speak, we are under an IMF program, so it is not possible to take over power and seek to do a few things regarding the economy and not engage these important stakeholders. So those meetings were intended to place the President's cards on the table, to indicate to them clearly what the direction would be, and have dialogue as to how the current IMF program can be tailored to meet the exigencies of the time and what accommodations can be made to ensure that the economy is brought back on track, because currently the economy is in pretty bad shape and very soon the figures will become apparent to all.
That same week also saw an order to the IGP to investigate election killings, termination of the appointments of all metropolitan, municipal and district chief executives, MMDCEs, and prompt actions that averted doomsor.
Through determined efforts, I can report that we have now averted the looming threat of power outages. and began delivering fuel to the thermal plants in the east in advance of the shutdown of the West African gas pipeline. And Honorable Jinapo, I want to congratulate you for working very hard.
So that was the president ending the first part of, it's actually a 17-minute documentary we'll play for you at the end. So let's talk to his spokesperson. Welcome to the show, Honorable Felix, Kwakye Ofosu.
Thank you very much, Bernard.
Is it Ofosu Kwakye or Kwakye Ofosu?
It's Kwakye Ofosu.
Does it even make a difference?
Well, it does. I mean, the arrangement matters. Kwakye is my middle name. Ofosu is my,
so Ofosu is your surname?
my surname, yes.
And you are now the MP for?
Abura Asebu Kwamankese.
Abura Asebu.
I noticed that it's quite a mouthful for you, but...
Is it 3 towns?
Yeah, 3 traditional areas.
Abura Asebu.
Abura Asebu Kwamankese.
So who are the neighbors of Abura Asebu Kwamankese?
Okay, so we have 4 or so neighbors. There's Cape Coast South, Cape Coast North.
Okay.
There's Asin South, and then there's Infantsiman. And then somewhere along the line, there's also Ejumakwe Nyanisiam. So there are 5 neighboring constituencies.
So these are Fanti speaking?
Fanti speaking, mainly Fanti speaking.
How comfortably do you win the seat?
By a wide margin. A vote difference of 11,000 and beyond.
Because last 4 years, you lost by a very small margin.
I lost by 176 votes.
176 votes?
Yes.
Did you do a recount?
No, I didn't recount a recount. I thought that was fair. So.
Did you lose to the same person you beat?
No, the incumbent MP lost the primaries. So he could not contest. So a new candidate emerged.
So that was your baptism of fire into electoral national politics?
Absolutely. And it makes a world of difference, you know.
Wow.
Yeah, there's a world of difference between what we practice here, if you like, at the elite level, if you want to call it that way, and then what obtains at the local level. There you see our country for what it really is. Because often there's a gap that we do not appreciate. But when you go down there, engage the people and try to represent them, then you appreciate that there is so much that we need to do in this country in order to bridge the gap between those who have and those who do not
So
have.
being an MP, did that change your sort of outlook? Because your politics was, you were one of the strong guys who speak very forthrightly.
Absolutely.
And people like you, usually, some people think it's better you don't have to even go and ask for anybody's votes because you are a bit hard. But when you have to be an MP, you have to smile, you have to beg, you have to cook banku.
Well, I don't think that one has
open.
to. You don't have to lose your principles in order to
Okay.
become an MP, except that you need to be more empathetic and sensitive
Okay.
to the plight of people. It also opens your eyes a lot.
Okay.
And as I said, you see the country for what it is, and you realize that even if you thought in the past that you were onto something, there's much more that you were unaware of, and that there's much more that you need to take into consideration, and that you could be a much better vessel, as it were, to champion the cause of those who are deprived. So it's been a revealing experience, and through that, it has modified the way that I viewed politics and governance. And
has there been some sort of baptism of fire for the new MPs? I say this because when you watch the sittings, it looks like the senior MPs want to show that new people should take their time. But some of you, the new guys, have been on the media for long.
absolutely, we've been around for quite some time. In fact, as long as some of the seniors have been, except that we have not had the opportunity to be in Parliament. But I think that the Speaker and his 2 deputies have been quite receptive to contributions from new MPs. I recall that there was one session where the second Deputy Speaker prioritized the contributions of new MPs, and he encouraged as many of us as possible to contribute to the debate. I think that it was a good exercise. There are many who may have a difficulty with public speaking, even though they've been involved in grassroots politics for quite some time. They've not had that kind of pedestal to show what they can do. So it takes quite some doing to marshal the necessary confidence to speak in a place where there are seasoned politicians, people who know what they are about and may not hesitate in heckling you.
But I'm told there's a difference between what you are doing here and what you do there, because here you are just flowing, but there
there's some heckling,
all
which is
kinds
allowed.
of, and I'm even told the way you are supposed to, you can't use
Yes,
some
there are all
words.
manner of rules that one needs to observe. There are etiquettes, we have standing orders, and other conventions and practices that you need to abide by. But essentially, if you've been in the public domain for quite some time, it is not significantly different. You are not allowed on this program to use some kind of language. I don't think that you permit me to use vulgar language here, or insulting language, or language that is derogatory of others. So it is same, except that there you have to go according to certain rules. It takes quite some time to master it, but it helps if you've had a background in public activism and public speaking, then learning the rules are much easier. But I must say that I've been impressed with the caliber of people who are, especially the new ones. I think that they make up more than half, if not two-thirds, of the number of people in the House at the moment because of the way that the elections went. But by and large, I think that will do good. And
for your position in particular, you know, you were the spokesperson for the transition team.
Yes.
And then now spokesperson to the president and minister for government communications.
Absolutely.
Some purists for separation of powers think that for the role of the president's spokesperson, it's not good for the person to be an MP, because once you are the spokesperson for the head of the executive, you cannot be a member of the legislature. Did that come up in the discussion when the president spoke to you about this role? Because I noticed your deputy is not an MP.
Yes, she's deputy spokesperson to the president. But I also happen to occupy the position of Minister for Government Communications.
Okay.
Now, what it is that my role is no different from the Finance Minister or the Energy Minister or any other minister who is also a parliamentarian. In fact, it is no different from what exists in the UK, where just about every secretary in the cabinet is also an MP.
Okay.
So if these are people that we are learning from, and they have a system where everyone who is in the executive is also in the legislature, and the legislature is supposed to be something of a watchdog over the executive, and there is no difficulty. I think that we can also do things like that. Difficulties do not exist. Yes, I agree that at some point we are going to have to look at that arrangement and see whether it has been beneficial in the long run. Would we be better off as a country if the legislature was truly independent of the executive and that they could, as it were, carry out their oversight responsibility without looking over their shoulders? That is a conversation we can have. And I'm sure during the constitution review process it may come up strongly. But now, it is not necessarily a problem, really. What it is that we just need a vibrant opposition, even if they are limited in numbers, to be able to man up and point out where they think wrongs are being done. But ultimately, the way that the Ghanaian electorate has behaved, at least over the last 3 electoral cycles, should tell anybody that even if state institutions do not do their job, they are more than willing and capable of punishing governments that they deem have not performed to their satisfaction. Because we have a situation where in 2016 we lost by nearly 1 million votes. I, in particular, thought that was an aberration. It was most unlikely to happen again. Perhaps Ghanaians were angry at something may not have gone well. In 2020, the same electorate managed to reduce the gap significantly to 500,000. And then they decided that as for MPs, they were not going to tolerate them at all. So they massacred, quote unquote, a lot of the MPs, did not return them, and nearly gave the opposition a majority in parliament. Then in 2024, it was an all-out rout for the government, both in terms of the presidential election and the parliamentary
So even
elections.
you were surprised?
Even I was surprised. I knew we were going to win, but I thought perhaps it would be much closer than it eventually turned out. Winning by a margin of 1.7 million really gave me something of a jolt, a reality check. What it told me is that contrary to popular opinion that we had won, I think that the Ghanaian electorate punished the MPP for poor governance. Therefore, it becomes a cautionary tale to us that if we do the same things that the MPP did, perhaps we are going to lose by an even, because if they can cause one party to lose by 1.7 million vote margin, who is to say that they cannot inflate a 3 million deficit loss on us? So it has given us cause for reflection. Indeed, President Mahama himself has reflected that position. If you read his inaugural speech carefully, he hinted at that we must take a cue from what has happened and govern in a way that meets with the hopes and aspirations of our people. So we are quite cautious in the things that we do.
Let me deal finally with the issue of your role, and then we'll move to other issues. I think in previous NDC governments, the communication portfolio has been merged with the information portfolio. So I think when the president himself was a minister, the communication ministry was also at some point communicating for the government. And I think under Mills or Mahama, there was one thing like that. So how different is the Minister for Government Communications from the Minister for Communication and Digitalization?
Well, if this matter came up during my vetting, what it is that President Mahama has long believed that it's not necessary to have a Ministry of Information. Yes, government must have an outlet through which it interfaces with the public and gets its message across, no doubt about it. But we don't need a whole ministry, a whole setup like that to get that done. So in the past, he has tried to achieve that objective by merging it to the Ministry of Communications. But you find also that the Ministry of Communications itself is plate full, and that it deals with a lot of heavy lifting in the telecommunications and broadcasting space. It has to do regulation. It has to ensure the leveraging of technology and so many other things that attention, as it were, shifts to that heavy lifting, to the detriment of government information management. There was a time that I was Deputy Minister for Communications. I basically functioned as an information minister because my minister was overwhelmed with so much that he had to do under the communications portfolio. The president believes that now that merger may not be ideal for obvious reasons. So the presidency can accommodate an arrangement where there's a minister for government communication like myself who gives weight and heft to government messaging, so that when you speak to me, you know that there's a certain level of credibility and believability that you attach, or at the very least, you know that it really represents the position of government. But at the same time, you don't need this huge superstructure of an information ministry in order for that activity. So we'll end up working with only a handful of people as opposed to a legion of people at the ministry. That, of course, begs the question as to what then becomes
of the ISD,
of
for
the
example.
ISD or agencies. Yes, the ISD, as I speak, they have about 1,500 staff.
Wow.
Spread across all the MMDs, ministries, departments, and agencies, and even districts and metropolitan and municipal assemblies. So we are in the process of doing a serious rebranding. Also, they are civil servants.
Okay.
And so their approach is not too well suited to the level of communication that needs to be carried out now. Now things are trendy. One has to be.
So who is the minister? Is it you?
It's me. I have responsibility for all the agencies that the information ministry used to have. So they will report to me. But
even though you are not, you are called a minister for.
Yes. So I'm a minister of state. You know that there are ministers.
But you are not based in a ministry.
I'm not based in a ministry. I'm based at the one office at the office of the president.
Wow.
So they all report to me. Those agencies function. For instance, there's a Ghana Publishing Company, which essentially is a printing house.
Okay.
There's a Ghana News Agency, which is a news agency. There's Ghana Broadcasting Corporation, which is a broadcasting house. There's Graphic Communications Group, there's New Times, and then there's the ISD itself. Now, the ISD is the agency that essentially does government PR. So that is the agency where some tweak would occur at in order that we bring them, or we align them with the communication objectives of government. That process is ongoing. Eventually, it will become known as a government communication office.
Okay.
With a much leaner, more efficient staff to get government's message across. There's a substantial difference between that and what the Ministry of Communication does, where my good brother, Honorable Sam George.
So even though you are based at so do you go to the ISD office?
Of course, if I have to look at what they are doing now, I'll go there. I'm not based there. I'm based at the presidency.
So they are like orphans now?
They are not orphans. Indeed, I would argue that they'll be much better off now than they were, because traditionally they've been starved of resources. One of the reasons why they've come under criticism and scrutiny for supposed poor performance is that they have been neglected, more or less, and despite their best, they have some very good structures. Indeed, they have a research unit that is able to conduct quick research for government on any number of issues. They have a media department that is responsible for coordinating government media relations. They have a library that has archival material dating back to colonial times.
But Felix,
and they have all manner
from
of
what I
agencies that
see,
do.
from what I see from outside so far, for example, the documentary we just showed was produced by the communication team at the presidency.
Absolutely.
The newsletters or the documents they produce, I don't think I see ISD's name in there at all.
No.
So what are they doing?
Indeed, even if the Ministry of Information was functioning at full throttle, the presidency would still have the right to project its activities. Now, I am both in charge of the presidency's communications and general government communication. I'm sure you know the difference between them because you've worked in this space for quite some time. The ISD essentially is concerned with coordinating all of government's PR.
Okay.
The MMDs, ministries, departments, and agencies. Indeed, they run a total of about 87 PROs. So we find like the likes of Tony Goodman, Otabil, and Lance, and that are people who you interact with regularly, and they are very efficient people.
The PROs of the ministry.
Highly experienced people. So they are PROs. They report to the ISD.
Okay.
So they are staff of the ISD posted.
I get it.
So they are employed as information officers, and then they are posted to, if you go to the districts, all the 262 districts have information officers. There are some that have 2 or 3 of them.
Okay.
And they basically lead the community engagement on behalf of the districts and all that. Now, I'm making the point that the reason why you may deem them inefficient is that there's a resource constraint. I also think that it has become a bit unwieldy, and that modern trends dictate that you have a leaner team that does this with cutting edge and deploys technology in order to get the message across. So we'll do serious restructuring to ensure that we bring them into the modern age, as it were, and we align them to government's communication objective. That will be done in the next few months or in the next few weeks. You will see a rebranding effort aimed at that. But essentially,
let's talk about the transition.
Sure.
Not necessarily the committees. A couple of things I've noticed, at least for some of the controversial seats, there was a lot of chaos in either getting a declaration or doing a collation, some of which have involved your supporters. And then in the immediate naming of some people in positions, particularly GRA, we've seen again party supporters mass up to protest. And then in some constituencies, Efutu, Ho Central, even in Bole, we've seen NDC supporters get angry, burn buildings and stuff like this. Would you say that that has been a blot on an otherwise very nice democratic exercise?
Of course, I would prefer that they didn't take place. You see, a protest in itself is not a problem. People can protest in a number of things, even if they are NDC supporters and they believe that an appointment does not sync with their own expectations. They are free to protest. When it gets violent, then it becomes a problem. But indeed, I had cause to make a contribution on the floor of Parliament about this matter. You see, what happens is that we have focused on elections management and declarations and transfers of power. So we've had 8 peaceful transfers of power over the period. It's all well and good. What appears to be missing is post-election management, especially in the immediate aftermath of the declaration. Because of the system of politics we practice, there are agencies like the police, the military, and other security agencies that are supposed to take charge of security. Right after the elections are held and the declaration is made, it appears that they are immobilized, they are frozen into inaction because they are unsure about their own fate. They do not want to offend the incoming government. So if supporters of the party that has won go on rampage and do things that undermine public peace and security, they are simply unable to act for fear that retribution will be exacted against them. I think that is where the missing link is. I, for instance, suggested on the floor of Parliament, my friends on the other side disagreed, that perhaps we could shorten the transition period. A month between the election and the transition is, in my view, too long and allows this thing to fester. Because what happens is that the party that has won is not in charge. So the incoming president cannot authorize anything to be done. Yes, he is giving security briefings, but that is just about it. The outgoing government also is crestfallen and practically loses interest in governance beyond going through the motions until they hand over. So there is a lacuna, a gap, which is then exploited by party activists who think that they were wronged in the past and so ought to wreak vengeance on their opponents. So in that melee, you have some of these things happening. I think that a proposed solution to that would be to shorten the transition period so that the new government can take over quickly and then assert control over security, like they do in, Downing Street. I'm sure you follow the UK elections. The very day elections are declared, a day after that, the new Prime Minister moves in, the old one moves out. And so you find that there's really no gap, there's a continuum.
Because their civil service is not politicized as ours.
That's precisely the point I'm making.
The kind of politics you guys do.
That is precisely.
You weed out everybody.
That is precisely the point I'm making. That there appears to be some institutional weakness that gives rise to this sort of conduct. And you see, it has happened over several electoral cycles. It's not something peculiar to the NDC or the MPP. At least since the year 2000, we've witnessed that kind of behavior. A stop must be put to it. And perhaps we should take advantage of the Constitution review to look at the processes again. Maybe an expansion of the Presidential Transition Act can accommodate this kind of lacuna. What is to be done in the immediate aftermath of the declaration of the results? Who is to take charge of what? I think that has to be fine-tuned.
But so you are seeing this as security issues in transition. But what about party supporters disagreeing with the president or trying to pressurize the president to appoint somebody?
Well, Bella, that's what you cannot legislate against. The point is that people have the right to protest. To the extent that it is lawful, it is peaceful.
Some people think they are being organized. I interviewed a man today who said he believes that,
it is entirely possible.
The opposition to the GRA boss is clearly some people in NDC who disagree with the nomination.
Bella, that is entirely possible.
And are mobilizing power.
You see, that is entirely possible. But I'm saying that in and of itself is not an issue. For instance, if they went to the GRA and held placards and chanted songs against the person who had no, that in itself is not a difficulty. If they go to the extent of damaging property or endangering life, then we have a problem.
In what they did?
Yes, then that has to be dealt with.
In Bole,
I will not
Efutu, they did.
I will not endorse that in any way, shape, or form. I don't believe that it is something that we need to encourage.
But we haven't had a strong condemnation from
there has. The president has made it clear. Indeed, a day
At
after.
which forum?
Oh, a day after the election. A day after the inauguration, there was a state banquet where.
Some have happened after that.
Oh yes,
last week there was one.
Indeed, he has had occasion during the second ministerial swearing in to caution against that, condemn it, and urge action to be taken. But I'm saying that it has become a subculture, as undesirable as it is. The way to address it, in my view, is not to just view it as a transient occurrence or something that just happens. It is a subculture. It is ingrained. It has become part of our electoral system. So let us adopt a roots and branch approach to address it. We need to tighten the systems and processes that we put in place to manage the transition.
All right.
There is too much of a gap that needs to be plugged. If you do that, it will not happen under the NDC, it will not happen under the MPP. Because I suspect that it will happen again if there's another change in government. Simply because of
if you don't do anything about it.
Yeah, but you are not going to do much if you don't institutionalize the arrangement. In the past, there was no transition bill, you know that. And so the transition was very chaotic. The 2000 transition was quite chaotic. In 2009, even the inauguration was so chaotic that something had to be done. So I think it was in 2012 that through the IE and other stakeholders, the Presidential Transition Act was put in place. I think the time has come for a review to address the fallouts that have arisen because of the inherent weaknesses in the law.
Let me deal quickly with appointments briefly. I know we have more time to do. So you've done 56 ministers.
Well, 42 substantive ministers. The deputy ministerial nominees have not been vetted yet, so you can't really count them as ministers. So 42. All of them have been inaugurated as of last Friday. So strictly speaking, this is my first official day as Minister for Government. Even though
you were inaugurated on
last Friday.
So this is your first working day?
It's my first working day as Minister for Government.
That's why you
are here. Well, I think that it's an occasion that we need to mark, don't we?
Wow.
But the point also is that this is the fastest time that a government has been put in place. If you consider everything.
You've calculated this from 92?
Since 92, I believe. This is the fastest time that it has happened. The vetting has gone on with record speed, despite all the theatrics and dramatic.
Your vetting was only 55 minutes.
Yeah, but that is significant compared to others. There was a nominee who was asked no question. At least I was asked some questions. But I think that it is not the length of the vetting, but it's the quality of questions that are asked. In my view, the questions that I was asked were tough. They were not easy questions by any means.
For you?
Yeah, but the likes of Honorable Mama Yaga, who are deeply knowledgeable in governance, and they put me through a grilling. They asked the right question. In fact, many were surprised that the majority leader, in Parliament, who belongs to the party of the president, would even...
Because he was a former minister in the role you were in.
Absolutely. So he was knowledgeable in the...
Because without the minority is boring.
Well,
so even the views dropped.
Well, it was not our doing.
We were watching it with a lot of excitement.
There's a bit of rambunctiousness, on the part of the majority leader. He's in a certain haste to impress. Whilst one can acknowledge the need to lift up your base after such a devastating loss, I think he's overdone it. He has not appealed to the right segment of society with his conduct. There's a way to mount opposition that is credible, that impresses the critical section of Ghanaian society that you need to swing onto your side in order to win elections in this country. I don't think he has done that. This unwarranted attack on the clerk of the Appointments Committee, for instance, is a major blot on them. It was needless. Again, their inconsistency. Today they are part of a process, tomorrow they are not part of a process. It is confusing people. You see, when you suffer such a crashing blow, you need to do proper introspection. You need to understand why you've lost. You are not going to recover the lost ground with this sort of behavior. So we've seen the likes of Honorable Abambagbin, we've seen Duajahu, we've seen other opposition, even the Honorable Chairman Sabonsu. He held his own at the Appointment Committee. He asserted himself. He said what he wanted to say. But he didn't go beyond the point that we've seen Honorable Afenyo-Markin and his colleagues go. And for a minority that is so limited in numbers, I don't think that this is the approach.
Let's take a breather. We're talking to Felix Kwakye Ofosu, who is the Minister of State for Government Communications and the President's spokesperson. We're looking at the first month of President Mahammed's administration. We're live. We'll take some comments from you as well. Stay with us.